All right. Awesome.
All
Awesome.
right.
Well, good morning, Crystal. How are
Good
you?
morning. I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. I wanted to kind of start off with you introducing yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. I am Crystal Townsend, from Detroit, born and raised. I'm very proud of that. Currently living in Portland. Been here for the last 2 years with my husband, and it's been another phase, another experience in my life, and enjoying it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I do want to just say that so people know that I really appreciate you for getting up this early because where you are, it is like 6 in the morning. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you for making this time for me. So yeah, let's just get to started. It's really, as I shared with you earlier before we got on air, this is probably really sweet for people with this being Sunday morning.
Hmm.
They really want to hear this story.
Yeah.
So let's kind of start off with your childhood and just kind of how that was for you.
Well, I think, like most people, living in Detroit, my parents weren't together, of course, but I had an amazing dad, and I lived between my mom and dad most of the time. Both households were very different. The dynamics were different. Um, Regular childhood, I think in saying that, it's important to note when I say regular, it may not be normal. Uh, for depending on who's listening. But I ran with my cousins, got into fights, got my butt whooped, ate good food at grandma's house on Sunday after church. But then there were some dark experiences that, because they've become normalized, you don't realize they're dark till later on in life when those things grow up with you and you understand that normal may not be healthy. And so, as God began to lead me on this path of unpacking my childhood, because that's where oftentimes a lot of our mindsets are cemented when we become adults, and a lot of our ways of being and doing is cemented, from things in our childhood experiences, lessons. And so, yeah, I think I had a very normal childhood for an African American woman living in an inner city.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting because I like how you touched on normal versus healthy, right? Because things do become normal to us quite often. I mean, because people don't understand when you're just living, life is what it is, right? I remember, I have four sons, and I had the first one at a very young age. And people always ask me, even right now, how did you do it? How did you do it? And in my mind, I just did it because that's what you did, right? I didn't think about it. So, yeah.
Same here. I think that I saw girls all the time get pregnant at a young age. I was a young mother, got pregnant at 17, had my son at 18. I think throughout my childhood, sexualization was a thing that ran. I always saw sexual things, I always was exposed to, heard very perverted things, but it became normal, not necessarily healthy. So, yeah, it's amazing how those things begin to really intertwine with your soul. And a lot of the times, you got adults even running around and don't realize that it's things that they were exposed to in their childhood. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's generational trauma, right? That we pass
Hmm.
one to another. So, okay, so your childhood, you start to get older and kind of share some of the paths you took in life because I really want to talk. I love success stories. I love stories of light. I love stories of us being able to embrace the dark, right? And then also celebrating the light, right? So kind of tell the story about how you got into some of your, I don't know if you would call them dark spaces, but share that and what you feel about it.
I think one of the things I was thinking about recently is how I became involved with being an exotic dancer in a strip club. I can go back to being a young woman, and I had a cousin that I really admired, that I was really close to, who was a stripper. And it was the things that I saw, the things that she talked about with me. She was a much older cousin, made it seem something that was glamorized. And at the time, you don't think of it as anything because you're little, but it was a seed that was planted in my life. So then when I became older, I had a friend who was in college who stripped. And I could immediately relate to that because it was something that was already in me because of my cousin whom I looked up to. And so when I got in a tough spot, it was a natural and normal, again, thing for me to say, well, hey, I can go and strip and it'll be okay. And that was another seed, something that affected me very deeply. I learned really fast that my place was not in the strip club. It wasn't glamorous. Women are made up really pretty, but they lead very ugly lives. And when you begin to see that and to see how it literally pervades a person's being, um, I thought that I could, have two separate personalities to deal with it. And that became another issue in my life that I had to deal with and really had to go through a lot of healing and deliverance after my change or crossover from, um, we would say being born again. So after I was born again, I started to realize I was dealing with two people on the inside of me, um, and one was named Seduction and one was named Crystal. And I had to get to understand who Crystal was because I didn't know her because I hid her away. Starting in my childhood all the way up into the strip club, Crystal had to be hid away to be protected. And so um, that was a life-changing experience for me. And ended up happening, everything came to a head in my life. I began to have panic attacks out of nowhere. And it was literally a situation where it was severe. I was literally having panic attacks all day, for several weeks. And they was trying to figure out what was going on with me, putting me on heart monitors. I was going through depression. I wouldn't get up and bathe a lot of the days. I couldn't eat. I didn't know what was going on. I thought really I was going to die. And it began to dawn on me that what I'm dealing with must be spiritual, because I've never dealt with anything like that before. And something that's really deep. I remember we had a woman who came to our church, and one of the things she said to me, she said, I'm looking at you, Crystal. She said, and I'm looking at a lot of pain and a lot of hurt that you refuse to look at. She said, but God said, I'm going to cause you to look at it and deal with it. And I remember that word, and I remember being so disgusted, because I'm like, what is she talking about? I'm fine. And we think that until things start coming up. So, of course, I'm starting to get panic attacks out of nowhere. And I remember, and I said, okay, what is going on with me? And I began to have a series of visions and dreams. And I had a young woman that a lady who came into my life and helped walk me through what a healing process. And it was very hard. Oh my gosh, it feels like uh, you're losing your mind,
Well,
truly.
that's tough. I mean, that's tough. I mean, that's the part that people don't understand is that is hard work. And some call it shadow work, some call it, just like you said, unpacking things within yourself and seeing some of that stuff gets heavy. It's not glamorous at all. It can be very heavy and very exhausting. So no, I feel what you're saying. Yeah.
Mhm. I'll even talk about, I remember, and being in a Christian church, and I think the church is evolving. And when I say evolving, I mean sometimes I remember a time where the church was not a proponent of therapy. It was, come here, let us cast out this demon, and you'll be all right. Now, let me say this. I do believe that there are dark spirits that can come into a person's life that need to be cast out, evil spirits, demonic spirits. But I also believe sometimes those things are able to get in because of our mental health. You understand what I'm saying? Because of our decisions. And I'm a proponent of both. Sometimes you need therapy, and sometimes you just need good old demon cast out of you. And sometimes you need both. And I was a person who needed both. So I remember going, and they kept saying, trying to cast out a spirit of fear. Now, I was dealing with an extreme amount of fear. But I thank God for that lady, and God will always send you a partner, somebody who'll come alongside of you and walk with you, and be not only a cheerleader, but somebody versed in uh, healing. Because what I'm learning is healing and deliverance are deliverance doesn't just mean I'm casting out a demon. And I want to really make that clear. Deliverance is healing. Deliverance is if I'm in trouble, the situation turns around for me. It's not just let me deal with a dark spirit. You understand what I'm saying? And so that opened my eyes to how important it is to understand that healing of the soul is not always let me cast the demon out. Sometimes God has to challenge mindsets and get in there and really begin to get to the root. And so I remember them trying to cast out fear. And this lady said to me, she said, "Did you ask God what the root of what you're going through is?" And I said, "No." She said, "Do me a favor when you get home, when nobody's around, just ask him." And so I did. I got home that day and I sat there and I began to talk like, I know I'm in fear. I know that I'm really afraid, but I couldn't even get to the question. And I literally heard a voice, audible voice say, "The root is not fear." And I'm talking just like I'm talking to you. I'm like, "So what is the root?" And I heard like a reverberating unbelief. I'm like, "What?" What am I not believing? What am I not getting? It was so foreign to me. And when I went back to her, she said, "Okay." She said, "I want you to sit in that." She said, and the way, just like he answered you and told you the root of all this anxiety that was manifesting and severe depression, she said, he's gonna get to the root of it. She said, it might be a thought, something from your childhood that you suppressed and buried that's gonna come up all of a sudden. You could be washing dishes. It's gonna hit you out of nowhere. She said, so I want you to quiet yourself for the next week or two and be ready because God is getting ready to begin to reveal some things to you. And I remember that whole week I was washing dishes and I'm like, wait, you want to show me something? I was looking for it and nothing. And I began to get so discouraged. And I saw her that weekend and she said, "Did God," we were sitting in the car talking. She said, "Did he show you?" And I was like, "No." And she began to talk to encourage me. And out of all times, right then and there, it was like I was in a trance. She was talking, but I had been taken somewhere else. And where I was taken was when I was a young mother and I lived with my father. And I had a stepmom who was abusive towards me because she was jealous growing up of my dad and I's relationship. And you know, you 18, you got a new baby. I'm living with my dad, and I'm in there like, yeah, try me now, because I'm grown now. See, when I was little, you could get away with it, but now that I'm grown, we might fight in here, you know. And I remember my father, she must have said something to my father about how I was kind of, buffing up at her, like kind of, my disposition was saying that, even though I didn't say that. And he took me back to a conversation that I had with my dad during that time. We were sitting on a couch, and my dad said, I know that he named her name. He said, "I know she's a witch." He said, "And I know she's done these things." He said, "But I have two other daughters that I have to raise. And if you're going to stay here, I need you to help me keep the peace because I have my other daughters I have to raise." And in that moment, what I remembered was in my head. I didn't say it to my father. I said, "You coward." I said it in my heart. But here's the thing, God even hears our unspoken thoughts, what we say in our heart. And in my heart, I said, "You coward. You mean to tell me you know that she's a witch? You know that she's abused me? And you want to keep the peace instead of protect me?" And God brought me back to that car. And I heard his voice literally say, "Because your natural father didn't protect you, you don't believe that I will protect you." And it was as if in that moment there was something inside of me opened up and I just broke down, like literally had a breakdown in that car. The breakdown was because, first of all, I didn't even realize that in that moment is where this spirit of unbelief entered my life through that interaction with my father at 18 years old. I didn't know it was there. I didn't even remember that happened because it was something I suppressed. It was just something I said in my heart. And because it was painful, I suppressed it and kept on living. But it affected me 20 years later. And God had to go back and say, no, we need to process this. Your father, who you adored, who adored you, acknowledging that this woman was physically abusive, verbally abusive, emotionally abusive to you, and not dealing with that, but instead teaching you to just keep the peace and go along to get along. Let's deal with that. And so it was like an onion. I never forget she used that uh, terminology with me. God will peel back. It peels in layers. And so you'll get that first layer, and then he'll go a little deeper, and then he'll go a little deeper, and you're like, my God, when does this end?
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. I want to interject for a second, and I'm going to mute you only because when we both are unmuted, it's a little bit of feedback, and I don't want that to impact the conversation. But with that said, I really there's a few things that you said that really stuck out to me. You know, for one, I always want to tell people that this is not any type of condemnation or anything towards the people that raise us, right? Because oftentimes and not with you, but just sometimes we feel like, we're upset and we want to, pay back. And you're not doing that, of course. But really, honestly, this is just our truth and our experience, right? And the things that impacted us. And so, most people, when you start to, like you said, unpack and really dig deep, you realize that people were doing the best they knew how to do, right? And sometimes some people just didn't do what they were supposed to do anyway. And that's a whole nother story. But it is what it is, right? And we have to deal with it on our end on how we go on with life and how we unpack those layers and how we find peace within ourselves. And even with the path of, being a dancer, this is not any type of condemnation of people that dance because people do it, and some people enjoy it and some people don't. But this is your story, and I appreciate you for sharing it because some people do go to a certain type of life to, seek validation, to feel some type of self-worth, to feel that love, right? That they did not get. So no, I appreciate you for sharing, and I want you to continue. But this is your truth, and I appreciate it. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that impacted us as children, and you grow up and you're like, wait a minute, that was really heavy, and I didn't even realize that it was because again, stuff is so normalized, and when you see everybody around you living a certain lifestyle, that's what so go ahead, but I just wanted to interject with that for sure.
Absolutely. I think that, and I want to keep touching on this theme of we normalize things that really aren't healthy. And, as especially as African American people, I can't speak for other cultures or races. I do know that there is no temptation that takes us except what is common to man, meaning we all go through things in life. But some things are very cultural, and our culture, even down to our DNA, we've learned how to live, go on, breed in trauma, and in living out of a place of survival. You understand what I'm saying? And never get to a place of truly thriving. And so a lot of the times those traumas are so normal to us because of our history, because of the things we see in the media every day in our neighborhoods. And we go and we get into relationships with people and we don't even recognize how those things affect the success of those relationships, why we can't get ahead in certain areas. And it really is a time of self-reflection. Even down, I don't know, I guess I'm gonna jump around a little bit, whatever comes to me. I'm even thinking about in this moment, I remember when I first got married. And this is the beautiful thing about healing. It's, you'll go through seasons where it may be intense, and then God is so gracious. It'll be seasons of rest and things will be, smooth and calm. And then you'll go through something, and it may be a little thing, but you've learned through those intense seasons how to say, wait a minute, why am I responding like that? Let me unpack this. Because every time, and I think that's a very healthy place to be in, because a lot of the times we justify, our responses, our actions, what we do, and we don't dig deeper. And I remember when I first got married, um, I would, whenever my husband and I would get into, I love what Juanita Bynum used to say, heated fellowship for an argument. We would get into heated fellowship. And I would always pack my bags and run to my daddy house when I was mad. And I remember one day him saying, why every time we get into it, you pack your bags and go to your dad's house? And I had an attitude, so I'm like, whatever, I'm going to my daddy's house. And I packed my bags and I get to my dad's house. I still had a room there and everything. And I remember laying in the bed being quiet, and it just dawned on me, his question. It didn't really hit me until then. I was like, yeah, why do I always come to my daddy house? I just said it out loud. And do you know, um, in that moment, I remembered a moment of clarity. And I really believe this was the Lord. When I was little, whenever my mom, I would have a problem in school or fight, or, I was one of them kids who fought, girl. I was always fighting, okay? And I remember I would get in trouble in school. I would do something to piss my mom off. And she would call my dad and say, you going to your daddy house. And in that moment, it just became so clear. Like, okay, so because my mom, I learned to run to daddy house whenever there was an issue and not stay and deal with it, right? Um, and I packed my bags and went back home, and I never did that again, because I recognized it was a behavior that was learned that I had never even, something so small. I would always go back home, but I would stay the night and cool off and then go. And it was like, no, and those are those little things I'm talking about that we learn from our childhoods that we carry through life, and if I wasn't in a space, a question is very powerful. I've learned you got to know how to ask yourself the right questions. Ask God, why do I do this? Why? And you may think it's justified. Well, I'm going over there to chill out. It's all good. I'm going back home. But no, let's unpack that. Why do you do that? You understand? And so I think that is the difference between people who kind of evolve emotionally, spiritually, even physically, and those who kind of just stay where they are and they never challenge themselves and their behaviors and their mindsets.
Right. That part is so wild to me. Right. That is so wild to me that some people are very comfortable in staying where they are, like for long. And I'm not saying if you're content with like your home or content with the car you drive. I'm talking about like you mentioned, emotionally, spiritually, how you can't, like how you don't want to change. It's really interesting, especially in a time of cancel culture. I always kind of talk about how, if I remember someone when I was younger and they were in their 20s or early teens and they did some real dumb stuff, right? Or said something really dumb. Them getting canceled when they're in their 60s is so interesting to me when people find out what they said in their teens. Cause I'm like, I know for myself, I've grown. Okay. It's some things that people might hear me talking about fighting and being, combative at times. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm defending my position, right? So there's times in my life that I think back, I'm like, I would never deal with it the way I do now. At that time, I would have never dealt with it that way. But with growth, maturity, self-reflection, being honest with yourself and saying, okay, what's my big picture here? What do I want to accomplish in life? I changed and I evolved. And that's the part, that's why I think it's so important for us to share these stories, our stories, because this is real life, man. I mean, we're not living in a fairy tale. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be honest with ourselves that people do grow, people do change. And I don't know, I just always find it so wild and so crazy that people don't think that evolution takes place, and people should evolve and grow and they change. And, so yeah, carry on.
No, that's good. I feel like because the truth is a hard pill to swallow. especially about ourselves. You really have to be in a place where, when it starts to affect you physically, when you've ran, and this is my story, and in reading other people's story and listening to other people's story, everybody gets to this crossroads in life where something happens and it makes you stop and say, okay, I got to deal with this. I don't have unless I'm going to just be comfortable in my mind manifested as sickness. And I've come to realize a lot of issues, when God really wants to heal us emotionally and from emotional trauma, or just things that we're doing that we haven't taken the time. It might be that every time you get paid, you spend your whole paycheck shopping, and it's like, wait, why do you do that? And you need a place to live. Those things have to be dealt with. And I think sometimes we don't stop to really face it until we're hit with something that makes us look at it. And I know that was my story. Again, I didn't even realize it was something I needed to look at until that woman, that prophet said, I'm looking at you and God is saying. And I was so mad, like, what? Girl, bye.
Right, don't be calling me out.
Yes. So I was like, that ain't for me.
Right, right.
I'm happy. I ain't what hurt. I don't feel hurt.
Right, right. That's our natural defense. And I want to say this too, because I always preface it with this when people talk about spirituality or God or Allah, whatever people call their source of what they feel is their power. I always like to say, that people can think things are real, not real. People can think that spirits and demons and angels are real and not real. But I know for myself, I mean, I've seen things, I've heard things, in some of my darkest, I'm talking about darkest times. I remember, I mean, clearly to this day, where I believe I entertained angels, like the scripture talks about, how you can entertain angels unaware. So be careful how you deal with people. I know for myself, I've seen things and heard things. So whatever people, want to argue about, like what they want to call it, I don't get into those arguments because I know that there are things in my life that it was not a human experience. You know what I mean? I literally remember seeing things, different lights, different hearing things. And so anyway, I always like for people to talk about their experiences, and we don't have to debate it. We don't have to debate, if you go to church, if you go to a mosque, if you go to, we don't have to debate that. A tabernacle, we don't have to debate it. For me, I'm not going to, because I know for myself what I've experienced, and I know for myself that things have happened that were very real, that I had to look back like, whoa, that was like almost tangible, right? And so anyway, go ahead.
No, that was so good. Um, I love that. We're not going to debate. You just stand on your story. I'm going to stand in my faith because I know, like you said, without a shadow of a doubt, that these aren't made up things. Like there was really, physically, the doctors wanted me to be on antidepressants, Xanax, and all of that, Prozac. And I remember my husband saying, "Don't you take that? Like this is just something you're going through. Don't take that." And really, once the more that I worked out those things, it was like little by little, it left. It did. And so that taught me that sometimes mental illness is a chemical imbalance and you need medication. And sometimes it is something that you need to unpack. You going crazy because you got all this trauma in you that you're not unpacking. And so it's affecting your mind, it's affecting your spirit, it's affecting your physical body. But I want to dig into that. I remember like even my call to God. Growing up in church was one thing. I think I always believed in God, not necessarily maybe because of my grandparents and my parents. Um, I've always, from a young age, had dreams and visions, and I think that's really why I believed in God. I knew from a young age that this wasn't natural. I remember at 17, my grandfather died. I was sitting up like at 3, and I was pregnant. And it was like the middle of the night, 3 in the morning. And I remember I literally said, I wasn't a girl that prayed a lot. And I just said, God, why am I up? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I literally heard your grandfather's dead. And immediately I dismissed that. Like, what? No, I'm thinking it's me. And literally the phone rang 20 minutes later. There was my grandmother screaming. My grandfather was dead. I have so many experiences like that that let me know that God is real. And, I don't condemn anybody who's not there, or who refuses to kind of search for that answer. Um, I think even my call to God, my call out of the strip club and to God was very supernatural. I can remember being in the strip club and feeling like somebody was watching me. You know how you get those feelings that are just eerie? I have not had many of those in my life. I can count on one hand those experiences, and this was one of them. And I just would have this strong feeling like somebody is watching me. And I would have dreams that a man that looked like death was chasing me. You know how that figure we always say, the Grim Reaper, that's what he looked like. But in those dreams, every time he would get close, I would sense it and I would escape just in a nick of time. Every dream. What's wild about that is when I was growing up in my mother's house, this is the same. I would have dreams that this same spirit was chasing my mother. My mother would hide my brother and I in the dream so that we were saved while she ran. So then when I became an adult and I'm in a strip club, now the dreams have shifted. This thing is chasing me, but I'm getting away in every dream just in the nick of time. Now, what's so crazy is we don't often, when we're very young in our gifts, the things that God has endowed us with, we don't know how to kind of match them to what's happening naturally. So I didn't realize that I'm having these dreams in my from when I was little to when they transitioned to when I was adult, that it was even connected generational, right? Because at first this thing was chasing my mom and my mother was hiding us, and now it's chasing me and I'm getting away in a nick of time. And then I'm not recognizing that how is this thing trying to manifest in the natural, right? So I had no clue all of this was related. And I remember my mother one night, I had came home from the strip club in the bed. I had just gotten to bed and my mother started screaming from the other room, my name. And I'm like, Mom, what is wrong with you? Why is you screaming like that? And she's like, oh my God. I just had a dream. And my mother was having these dreams that they would find me raped and strangled. And again, I'm not putting two and two together with things. All I can say is that I remember I would start going to the club some nights and I would get so sick. And I think we should, even physical healing, sometimes the things and sicknesses and pains that people are having is not always tied to a disease, even though,
Thing.
come on.
No, seriously, that stuff transforms within your body, and I'm a firm believer in that stress is cancerous. Like it literally, like our bodies literally respond. So I know myself, if I'm super stressed or super whatever, emotional about whatever is going on, my body responds to it. And
Mhm.
I really believe, inflammation, a lot of pains, a lot of hurts, a lot of sickness within our bodies. It definitely connects to the things that we allow within this vessel. Like this is a living thing, so when we let certain energies in, certain thoughts. I do believe that. So go ahead, because
No, that's deep. It's very true. And even as warnings, I remember trying to go in the days following, and I just would get this sickness in my stomach. And looking back, it was almost, I didn't realize it though. I wasn't relating it. It was like you cannot stomach this environment anymore, and you keep trying to force feed it to yourself.
it's like physically like killing you. It's physically
Yes.
yeah.
And I remember having a dream within those days. And in the dream, I was walking in a strip club as usual, going to the back with my bag of strip club clothes. And I'm in the back getting ready, getting myself, in personality and cue. And all of a sudden, all these people come running from the entertainment area, the strip club, to the back where the dancers usually are, and they're screaming. Like, if you could imagine if the world was ending right now, like, and we could see it in the sky, how people would be acting, that's how it was. It was literally like just chaos. And I couldn't even react fast enough because I'm like, what is going on? And as soon as I'm trying to figure out and catch my bearings, the roof of this strip club came off, and this light, this very, very bright light just shined on me, and I just woke up. Now, again, see, when you're in darkness, darkness is not just um evil. It literally blinds you. So even though I was getting all these signs, I'm in darkness, so I'm not putting it together. I can't see clearly, but I know something is happening. And I remember just having this strong urge to go to the library and find a book. And that wasn't something that I normally did. And I got up and I went to the library, and I'm going down the aisles, and I ended up in the Christian aisle. And I'm just looking at the books, and this book stood out to me, and it was by T.D. Jakes. It was called Maximize the Moment. And I will never forget it. I pulled the book. I just knew instinctively, but now I know it was the Spirit of God leading me. Because how would I would have never picked this. I just picked the book, checked it out, read the book, can't tell you anything. I can tell you one chapter, and it was because I needed that one chapter, and it was entitled Soul Aches. And I remember he started describing everything that I was going through. It's crazy, right? And he said at the end of the chapter, he said, "This is nothing but God calling you to repentance." It was a revelation. I was like, is this what I'm going? Oh my God. And he began to break down what repentance means. It means turn around, go the other way, change your mind. I'm like, okay, so you want me to change? You calling me to change? Okay. I'm not crazy.
Sometimes we need that, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
It was like it should have been so obvious, but for whatever reason, it was not because I
But like
was
you
in
talk about
darkness.
that blind, yeah, and that's the thing.
Hmm.
I love how you touched on that. It's not always evil. You know, when we talk about darkness, people always equate it to some type of like, really like demonic, evil thing. And it's not always that. Sometimes it is simply a blinder, right? To the real truth, or to what, your next phase is, your next transition. Because quite honestly, when you are a lover of life and knowledge, you are constantly evolving. Like, most people who are, growing understand that you constantly have new thoughts, because if you're searching and seeking, you will get answers. And in those answers, it does encourage you to grow and change. And that's a constant thing. I mean, even being, a mother, I think about that, about how, there's stuff that I did with my children when they were younger that I probably would never do now, because I know more, I've experienced more. But at 16, 17, it's like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm winging this thing, and I'm still winging it, but a little bit more. So
Yes. Absolutely. I want to be clear. I do believe that for me in my life, things were either good or evil, light or dark, God or Satan. I do believe that. So let me go back. So in that transition, I remember going to church. I remember asking God, what do I do? And I just knew in my spirit that if I continued living that life, it would be my demise. I didn't know who was watching me. I still didn't put it together. I only had a piece of it that God was calling me to change, but I didn't understand the dreams and that feeling I would get when I was at the strip club, like who's watching me? Um, but I remember I went to church. I literally gave my life to the Lord. I called a church I lived around the corner from, and somebody picked up. It was like 8 o'clock at night. This still sticks with me because I feel like this is the true mission of the church. One of the true missions of the church. Somebody picked up that phone on a weekday at 8 o'clock, and I was crying. talking about my life. I'm a stripper and I got this book and God is calling me to change it, explain everything. And she said, baby, don't worry. Come on, come here. She said, can you get here? I said, I can get there. Let me find a babysitter. I found a babysitter and I went. They had called in a minister. I mean, at this point, it was like 9 o'clock at night. And they literally sat there and walked with me. And that's when it became something real to me and not just something my grandmother told me. It was my own personal experience. And I remember that same night I was baptized, I understood. They took the time to teach me what it was I was doing symbolically, what it meant, what it stood for. And I remember after that, I knew I had to get in church because I wasn't in church. And I went back. I just knew, go to your childhood church. And I was standing there and I'm like this. And I hear the pastor say, is that my goddaughter back there? And I didn't open my eyes. I'm still like this. And somebody tapped me. He said, tell her to come here. And somebody tapped me. He said, come here. Come here, baby. And I go up there. He said, baby. He said, do you understand? He said, you had come across my prayer, my heart so many times. And I was praying for you. He said, do you not understand that death had came for you? Now, nobody knows what I just told you about those dreams I was having, that feeling. He said, do you know that death had came for you so many times? He said, and the only reason death couldn't take you out is because God told death to stand still. He said, baby, you owe God a praise. He said, because God spared your life. And I remember that's when I got it. Like, oh my gosh. I don't know what somebody was plotting. All I know is I would literally feel like I was being watched and I was having these dreams that I'm just escaping by the skin. I could feel it and I just escaped.
And your
Who
mom
knows?
had a dream too about, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't know this. So I knew it was revealed by the Spirit of the Lord. And I did. That's when I understood what giving God praise meant in that moment, that birth praise in me, because wait a minute, when I'm looking back over my life, yeah, it's not far fetched to say, because there are a lot of things unseen that we don't see, that we don't know. If God was to take the veil off our eyes, and we could really see, just as we see the natural, the spirit, and what was being plotted on any given day, what could happen, we couldn't handle that. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
and I want to add this in too because I am a firm believer that I don't know. I mean, even for myself, I will say that I know that I have a mission here, right? I know that I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to do something. I mean, I have so many stories, of times where I know that it was a spiritual interference. Okay. I will share this with you very quickly. I remember when I was in abusive relationship, the night that I fled, the night that I, ran from that situation. It was really interesting because I would never forget it because it was Christmas Eve. And that's back when a lot of churches would have like the Christmas Eve services, right? So I was preparing for that. The situation took place, it was explosive, blah, blah, blah. I ran with two of my children. Two were still there, and it's really interesting because I'll never forget the night was so dark. It was so dark because at that time the sun it gets dark really early, and it was a lot of snow on the ground. And I'm running through, didn't even have a coat on, none of this. I'm running through with my two children, and I remember I'm knocking on doors. Right, I'm knocking on doors for people to let me in. People wouldn't let me in. Some people looked out. They didn't want to get involved, which is okay. And I'll never forget, I ran to across this field and I go to kind of like an assisted living facility. And I see, of course they have lights on. So I'm like, and it's Christmas Eve. So everything is shut down, everything is closed. And so I'm banging on this door. And I'll never forget a woman walked by. And I'm gonna tell you really quickly, this is why I believe in people being placed in your life in angelic form. There was a lady at a McDonald's that was down the street from my house. She was, I guess what some people would say had different mental abilities, right? She was disabled, and nobody really talked to her. She would like wash what they call the trays. I mean, that's back when McDonald's used to have trays. She would wipe them off, and I would always speak to her. no big deal. I would just say, "How you doing?" In passing, and nothing. I thought about it. I mean, I didn't think much about it, and it was very interesting because that night when I ran, and I was seeking refuge, essentially, the lady that walked by was her. It was her. Out of all the people that walked by this door, it was her. And I remember recognizing it was her, and I'm like, I didn't know she lived there. I didn't know anything about her except for that she worked at the McDonald's. And I remember waving her like, please, help, help, help. And I remember she looked around like she was doing something she wasn't supposed to do. And because she was kind of childlike, and she let me in and said, sure, because she wasn't allowed, because I was coming in through a back door. I wasn't going through the front because it was closed. The entrance was closed down. She let me in. And I said, please let me use your phone. I just need some help. And because, mind you, when I was leaving, I was being chased. Okay. And she let me in, let me use the phone. I was able to call for help. But I'll never forget that. I forget that. And it always reminds me to treat people kind, because you just never know. I mean, the fact that she was there and happened to be walking by, living in the place that she happened to be at, was very, it still takes my breath away, because it just was just so perfect, right? And like I said, the whole town was dark. I mean, it was Christmas Eve. But I just think about that when you talked about your experience, because there are times where I know for a fact people have been placed in my life, situations happen for a reason, to protect me and keep me going and keep me whole and giving me that hope, and keeping that faith. So yeah.
Powerful. That's powerful. I think, my takeaway from this is, sometimes you get reminders, and while you're being a reminder, while you're being a light, while you're sharing your story to, help and encourage somebody in their process, that just to kind of look more, and to continue to look, for these signs in my life and not take anything for granted. Because truly, you hear stories all the time, of somebody who didn't make it that you knew or that you grew up with, and you know that it's because of the grace that's on your life. And like you said, the purpose. Um, Even more recently, I was dealing with something, and here comes a dream again, and it was a dream where God was showing me purpose, and He let me know, you're not leaving until you're done. And when you're done here, I'm going to take you. And to a lot of people, that would be scary, but to me, it was a promise. You know, I don't mind being took. I mean, you want to be taken if in your time when it's God doing it. You just don't want to be taken out of here, because of some evil in the world, or because, and I do believe it's a such thing as dying before your time, just because we are free will human beings and we can make choices. And those choices may not be the choices that lead us to destiny, but lead us to our demise. And so I'm so thankful for your show and what you're doing, giving people a voice, from all walks of life, because truly it's needed. And you can see that the state of the world, the condition of the world is very dark, and we need to shine, and we need to be very loud about our stories, so that people can find a glimmer of hope to hold on to, that they can come out.
No, that's really true, and it's really interesting because I love hearing these stories, because it's real life. Like, we really experience things in real time, and the fact that we've been sometimes taught to suppress and to keep, because they equate it with shame, and all these different words they like to call it. And it's like, there's no shame in my life. I mean, it's some things that I regret that I may have done to a person or in a situation. And I wish I would have known more, had, more wisdom and knowledge. But, my life, I don't feel shame in the choices that I made, because we literally most times are dealing with things the best way we know how. Like, sometimes you just don't know. I mean, when you even talked about, we first opened about survival, I was talking to my youngest son one day, and I told him, I said, I was like literally surviving when y'all were little. Like, I didn't know what was going on. We didn't have a lot. I mean, we had happiness, we had joy, which I think was an abundance. But I mean, let's be real. You need certain things to make it, right, and to thrive in life. And so there were a lot of things that I recall thinking back that I was literally surviving. I didn't know some days what was going on. Okay. I was like, look, I did the the best I can. But like I said, as you grow, you realize that and you can be honest about that. So I appreciate people like yourself who don't mind sharing the stories because again, like I said, there could be people in that situation of kind of confusion, right, in their life where they don't know which direction they want to go. And it's nice to hear stories of hope and redemption and change and all that stuff. So I want you to talk briefly about you did some excerpts in a book, right? And I want you to share that. I want to talk about that because not only are you sharing your story here, but I mean, you're essentially sharing it with the world, right? And so I want you to talk about your book and how that came about.
So I was invited to actually, there was a lady at my church. She's in media, like yourself, but she helps people to tell their stories. She does these anthologies, which is a collection of authors who tell a story to a certain theme. And, uh, another God moment. I remember several months before she invited me, I woke up one morning with a scripture on my heart. And that scripture was dealing with the parable of the farmer, remember, and the sowers, and how, the sowers went out to sow, and they sowed good seed, right? But while they slept at night, an enemy came in and sowed bad seeds among their good seeds. And, when the time came, those that tear grew up with the wheat, right? And we know the tear is the seed that isn't good, and they went to the farmer like, "Hey, I know we did good here. We sowed good seed. Where did this come from?" And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "Look, an enemy has done this." And God began to highlight that. And I remember getting my notebook and I began to write. And God took me back to my childhood when I was 3 years. So I had to be three. My mother, and let me make a disclaimer. My parents, because of my own healing journey, especially my mom, I recognize that she's been on this journey. Hers was a little bit more delayed because her situation was different. But I have a lot of grace for my mother, or I had a lot of grace for my mother because my mother, I recognized when she was going through this transition. And so my mother even is a different woman. But I did my transition first, and then God used me in my mother's life, which was a great honor. But um, my mother had a boyfriend. I never forget, his name was Larry. I remember the house, I remember her boyfriend, and it must have been we lived with his mom and him, because his mom, I remember being in one room, and then my mom, Larry, and me were in another room, and we all was in the same bed. And not unnormal to a family. You might have your 3-year-old child in bed with you. Now Larry wasn't my dad, but I remember them, being intimate. Now at 3, you don't know what it is, but you're looking at it, and you know, I can remember just looking and wondering and being inquisitive, and I didn't feel threatened or like my mom was being hurt or anything, but I guess I was kind of taking it in and processing it at 3. And here is how amazing a 3-year-old's mind is, because Larry had, I don't know if it was a friend or a family member, I can't tell you this man's name. If I saw his face, I wouldn't even recognize it. But I do remember that this guy used to molest me. And I can remember being in the living room of that house, and my mom would be just in the other room and it was going on, and I remember like tongue kissing. Now at 3, I thought, because this is what I saw my mother and Larry doing, that this was totally normal. I'm like, oh, my 3-year-old mind process, oh, this must be my boyfriend, like Larry is my mom's boyfriend then. You know what I mean? And sometimes you think because the child is a child, they don't know, right? But when you expose them to things, their minds do process. That is the way I process that. I didn't know anything
They
about
are
me.
whole human, and that's the part that I don't understand why people don't.
Yeah,
Children are whole humans, so they feel, they experience, they see, they do kind of organize these thoughts within their brains with the information that they have, right?
yeah, yeah. I didn't know about molestation or statutory rape or anything like that. So okay, this is good. My mom is brought this joy. They love each other. So okay. This is my boyfriend. And I remember walking around saying, my boyfriend, my boyfriend. And nobody had a clue that this man was molesting me or why I was even saying that. You know
People
what I
think
mean?
it's cute, right? They're like, "Oh, she got a crush on him," and people think it's cute instead of asking questions. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And I remember God showing me an enemy has done this. And
Mm,
he was taking me and just walking me through different experiences in my childhood, dealing with just sex and
mhm.
being exposed to things.
At
And
such an
he
early
kept saying,
age.
an enemy has done this. An
Mm,
enemy. And he was using that scripture as precipice. Like when I made you, when I created you, you were good. I said you were good. Go back and read it. You know what I mean? I made you in my image. You know what I mean? But you've grown up. And now I'm seeing some tears in your life that I didn't sow there. This is God. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, well, who did this? An enemy has done this. And he began to show me. You know what I mean? Again, we think sometimes things are so innocent. But he began to walk me through some things with healing in my sexual identity. And I think that, we often think that it's just men, we've almost normalized it for when men deal with it. And when women deal with it, it's kind of like a double taboo. Like, oh my God, but no, like we deal with things, we see things. And I remember him reminding me of things I saw with my father. Now, my father always treated me like number one, baby girl, princess. But I saw his interaction with women, firsthand. I overheard things. I saw things that were very perverse, and I'm thinking about it, and God is like, an enemy has done this. So all my thoughts and ideas around womanhood and sexuality came from these experiences that were totally traumatic. And so it was
They
as,
shape us, and they shape us.
Mhm.
They shape us, and yeah, they shape us. So
Yeah. And so when you start looking at it as good seed, bad seed, okay, how do we uproot this thing? I need you, God, to put the axe to the root of the tree. And I've had enough experience with God now that I can kind of walk through that with him and ask questions. And so that's how the book was birthed. I already had my chapter before the opportunity ever presented itself. And I knew it when I wrote it all. And I was like, my God, you've given me a chapter. And a few months later, Linda and I connected, and I just had to do some tweaking, but it was ready to go. I was already prepared. And so it was my time to do that. And what's really wild is, all through my church, my born again life, we do have prophetic people like myself. And I've always been told, God said, you're going to write books. You're going to write books. And so even though this was kind of me getting my feet wet, it made it a little bit more real for me. And what's even more wild is I remember being 14, calling myself writing a book called Dog Eat Dog World, right? So it was kind of like a full circle moment, like, this thing that has always been in me, it was placed there by God and it's part of purpose and destiny. And I just wanted to help people who struggle with sexual issues, who think there's no hope and they can't
yeah,
change.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a real thing, and and I also want to touch on, oftentimes women do share their stories of things that happened to them as children, um, and men go through the same thing, right? Boys are exposed to sexuality at a very early age, and sometimes a very predatory way. And oftentimes they are celebrated. Like people like, oh, my boy, he got, and they congratulate if the teacher is inappropriate with a young man. It's like kind of seen as a notch on his belt, like he's made it. And even if they're violated as young children, people don't sometimes don't take it as seriously as they do with a female. And so I really like when people talk about these things because it's really important for us to discuss. And then also it's important for parents to see some signs because, like you said, you weren't walking around crying or I mean, you may have been, but I'm just kind of going by the story you're telling. That you weren't walking around looking sad. You were kind of celebrating that this guy was like your boyfriend. So for parents, to look at that, it's like you're happy, not paying attention to really you're telling a story that they just don't understand.
And being careful what we expose our children to. I was a young mother too, and I've had to have that conversation with my child. That I was 18. I was trying to figure it out. I knew that I loved you. You were my world. I was in love the moment I gave birth. You changed me, to a certain extent. But I still was very green, filled with all this trauma and all these ideas that had nothing to do with, raising a healthy, emotional child. And so, as a parent, I've had to look at my child and say, ask for forgiveness and say, I didn't always get it right. I didn't get it right, probably 70% of the time. I mean, my heart was in the right place, but please
Yeah,
forgive me.
and
Yeah.
we make mistakes. We think we know, we don't know. We're trying to
Yeah.
the best we can, and it's really interesting because I do find it very interesting when people don't think they need to apologize to their children. They say, well, I'm the parent, so I'm the one. They need to be apologizing to me or whatever. And it's like, no, they are humans. And I think once we realize that we're all humans, no matter, a degree or, age or, demographic, we are humans. So human to human, sometimes I need to apologize to you and say, you know what, I failed you in that moment. We're trying to do the best that I could. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. I just think that we're all put here for a purpose. I think that it's not always easy. We're given the family we're given the upbringing we're given. I do believe for a reason. It has made the things that I have been through have made my heart so tender towards women, and I even feel a fire, a war even, for women's healing and deliverance because oftentimes we suffer in silence because think about it. I was raised with the strong black women. We suffer, but we got to raise these kids. We got to keep the household together. And it's like, no, wait a minute, we need a place that we can come to and be able to be honest and real and get support and help.
Well, and also women are taught that we have to be beautiful, we have to be this, we have to be this. I mean, it's just a lot of complexities that come with being a woman, and the societal pressures and expectations that people put on you. So not only are you trying to understand what the heck you're here for, what am I doing, you know what I mean, I also have to contend with all the different expectations that people put on me, in this society. So it's a lot, man. People just don't understand that, and I really love that we're able to discuss this.
Girl, that's powerful. First of all, expectation of others, even if they mean well, I have learned that it can kill you, like really, really dwarf you, kill you. Again, you don't want to get to a place where you have no honor for anyone, but you really have to have a strong sense of who God called you to be. You know, um, I remember it was a time I didn't even feel comfortable laughing and joking. That's like my natural self, being really silly and goofy and playing around because I had church people around me who were always like, you know, so solemn and holy, and I'm just like, my God, do you laugh?
Do you have a good time? And you want to ask them, do they fart too? It's like, are you a human? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going on? It's funny too because we talk about that, and people in my family and friends sometimes joke about, because some days I will come out and I'm really well put together, and then some days I don't care. Like, I literally will come out with different design patterns, different colors, and I really don't care. And in doing that, it really freed me from having to live up to anything, because it's like, look, this is what you're getting today. Do you still want to have coffee? Do you still want to meet? Because this is what I feel like I am today. And I don't want to live up to all of that. Things don't match all the time. And so I do that intentionally to free myself of this idea that you have to be this perfect robot, because we're not. And some days, for a lot of us, I mean, it's just does enough to just get dressed for the day. Some days you don't even want to get up. You want to just say, you know what, not today. I'll start this over tomorrow, but you have to keep going, right? So, yeah, yeah. So I get
Oh,
that.
those are the days that I find I need a little bit more time in my prayer closet, or a little bit more time with my praise and worship, or a little bit more time with my book and my journal. You know what I mean? And
that purging. Oh yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
remember God even started shifting my conversation because my husband would call like if it was a day off and he'd be like, "What you doing?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm just being lazy." And one day it just kind of dawned on me, like, no, you are not being lazy. You work hard and you are taking a day of rest. You know what I mean? And I said, you know what? Wait. I'm gonna stop saying that because I'm not being lazy. Like our words are powerful, right? I am resting. And the rest is just as important as the work because
Yeah.
in the
Say
rest,
that one more time. Yes.
yeah, and believe me, I'm the kind of woman I like the glam. I love it. But I'm really starting to embrace that because, in my 20s and 30s, I tried to kind of experiment a little bit. But when you like glam and stuff, you have these kind of the way people think about that, and so you kind of, shell up again. But no, I like glam. I like getting a couple pieces added and the lashes and, taking selfies with duck lips and, that's just me. You know what I'm saying? But I that was a journey to even embracing that about myself. And it was really God who did that. Like, listen, I've anointed you for beauty. People will be drawn by your beauty, but then when you open your mouth and you begin to speak, there's a purpose there for, and that has been the case with a lot. People are just drawn because, oh, your hair or this. And then when we started talking, the Lord would have his way. And there would be a time where they were like, oh my God, thank you for sharing, and so I think that's in.
I think that's a real thing. And I think you and I talked about this briefly, because I really do want to have a discussion surrounding that, how, people always talk about people who may not be what society calls beautiful or the standard, right, that society has. Um, but people who are, pretty, or, I hate using, but I'm, and generally speaking, what society, says is beautiful and beauty or whatever, people have stigmas that come with that, right? And they have different assumptions that people associate with that. So I like how you talked about how people will see you, and sometimes people see someone, that's really into glam, and they think, oh, she's just an airhead or she's whatever, and not realizing the intelligence that is behind that. Or that shines through that, right? And so I think that is very interesting because people are drawn to beautiful things. I mean, let's be honest. People are drawn to light. They are drawn to, different things that society says that they should be drawn to, right? It's just a natural science to that. So I like how you touched on it because I really want to talk about that one day. How people who are in that realm kind of go through that some hardships as well, having, what people assume about them because they're pretty, right?
What people perceive as pretty. Because when, not that I look in the mirror and I think, girl, you ugly. I mean, I don't think that, but I don't look in the mirror and think like, ooh, you just, oh, girl, you just, ooh, I don't. But I think the important thing is that you just learn to embrace like whatever your style is, whatever your flow is. If you a lot girl, you know what I mean, with some lip gloss and your, African garb, and if that's you, own it. You know what I mean? If you want to be in a robe from here all the way down to your ankle, you know what I'm saying? And you're going to have your hair pulled back. If that's really you, own it. You know what I mean? I just think I remember seeing there's a woman named Prophetess Sophia Ruffin, and I've been watching her transformation. She started out with like the tutu dresses with one side shaved, you know what I mean? But she got a radical word in her mouth. You know what I'm saying? But it's her, it's authentic. And I think people can feel when it's authentic and when it's just like, okay, you know, you just,
Optics or for image, and yeah,
mhm.
and truth comes in so many different forms and so many different presentations, right? And something, it's funny too because some days you may be feeling one way and the next day you may be feeling another, and it's okay to embrace all that we
Mhm.
we are we have so many different parts to us, so many different layers, and like you talked about the onion, so many parts to us. So yeah, yeah. Crystal, I could talk to you all day.
Girl,
I'm
I know. I was just sitting here like, ooh, girl.
talk all day. I appreciate you for sharing this space, for sharing your story. I always think it's so therapeutic for all
Yes.
involved when people share, when
Yes.
comfortable sharing, because some of us have, really gone through some heavy, heavy times, and I think
Yeah.
it's important for us to talk about that. Um, when people see things going really well, it's okay for us to share that it wasn't always like this, and what we
Mm.
did to get through it, to make it through. Because I remember, uh, someone told me years ago that if people went through what you went through, they they wouldn't have made it, and for you to still have a smile on your face is a blessing in itself, right? Is a gift in itself. So people don't understand all the time what people go through to get where they are. So that's
Yeah.
why I believe in celebrating right where we are, because
Yes.
we know what we went through to get to it. We know those times where there was nobody else around, right? They didn't hear the cries. They didn't hear, the questions of, like, what is happening? Why is this happening? People just don't know. So they see the results, right? They see the results, but don't understand. Like, they have no idea sometimes the path it took to get there, to even feel comfortable, right, within your own self and shining that light. So I appreciate you for sharing your story at 6 something in the morning. Girl, I love that.
Absolutely. That's even a testimony because I just saw somebody said, don't mistake your hill for a mountain. And I was just thinking, like, on this hill that I've arrived to, I haven't plateaued yet. I haven't been to the place that I believe God is taking me. But on this hill that I've arrived to, I'm learning how to embrace a ease. Yeah, I still work, but God has changed the season. It's so peaceful. I look around my home. God has really done a work. And I'm even learning, and this has been a process to learn how to accept the goodness. You've walked through so much heartache, so much trauma, so much healing, so much confusion, not knowing if things would ever change, and things have changed. And I didn't know how to. I was like, okay, this new too. Yeah. How do you handle being in a city like that? Everything is so beautiful. It's the atmosphere is so peaceful, and then you know God have increased us, and I had to learn how to no enjoy this. You can be thankful and celebrate this.
It's
You
nothing
know what I
wrong with
mean?
that. Yes, we got to stop shaming people for being proud of themselves. I mean, because again, it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, that if you never grow in this thing that you're going through, and not only spiritually and emotionally, but also there's some physical stuff that some tangible stuff that will grow as you grow, and it's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why we shame people for elevating, you know what I mean? Because I'm here for all of it. As long as it's not coming to me in, like, dirty or whatever ways, I'm here for it, because I worked hard. You know what I mean?
But and people need to see that, and we could get deeper. There's so much, but people need to at least know and see. And this was my issue when I was in the heat of things, and I felt like there was no hope. Nobody could see me. I literally felt hopeless. I literally was thinking I would have peace if I just kill myself. Like it was such a state of agony and confusion and apathy and anger and fear, and I remember looking just for somebody to keep it real. Like, oh my God, I know you've arrived, but tell me like about the times where you felt like me, because I need that hope right now because I'm feeling like I'm not gonna make it. You know what I mean? And I remember making God a promise, like, if you bring me out, I promise that I'll all, and I'm getting emotional saying that, but I made a promise that I will always be real and tell my real story, because people who are like me in the place where I was, they need to know that. They need to know like it doesn't have to end there. And because literally I was dealing with that spirit of suicide and mental health issues due to trauma. I understand what that place is like, not showering for days, not being able to eat, and
Plus, you're
just being,
tired. People don't understand it's a part of it's like fatigue, right? People get
yeah,
tired. Like people don't understand, and some people, thank you for sharing that because some people don't understand that people are really tired and it can look so many different ways. People could get up and look great,
yeah,
be happy and smile and all that stuff and still be tired, you know.
yeah,
So that's why we have to really limit our judgment um
yeah.
on people because we don't know what people go through behind those doors,
Come on.
yeah, oftentimes, I think about even with some things that has taken place here recently, people around me that have lost people, you could see a person in the store, you don't know they just buried somebody, you don't know what they're going through. So we have to treat people with kindness and some type of empathy, because again, like you said, you don't know their story, and that one moment could make or break, right? If you have someone that, like you talking about, where you feel suicidal and that you will bring peace to your life by ending it, right? That's a real thing that people deal with and experience. And if you would have encountered somebody that treated you like crap that day or talked down to you or whatever, or spoke life into you, right? Breath, spoke that breath of life, that's a make or break situation and encounter. So yeah, that's real. I'm thank you for, I'm not happy that you went through that, of course, but I appreciate you for sharing that because people really do deal with that in real time.
Yeah. I just want people to understand that, whatever it is, you can unpack it, as long as you're willing to do the work, like you can get through it, and there are days where you can rest and say, you know what, not today. I just want to lay here today and, sleep. Sometimes I needed those days too. You know what I mean? It was all a part of the process. The thing is, you don't, just I hope by my story, the little that I've been able to share in this hour and 15 minutes, that, people understand that, if you're dealing with something, unpack it. I mean, there's so many books, so many resources out here. Um, Now all you have to do is really reach out, and my name is there. I get inboxes all the time from women, and as much as I'm able, I'm always there to help. Just like that woman was there for me, to say, hey, did you do this? You ask this question, kind of look here, dig deeper there. And so I just feel like if people knew, how to get through a process, how to get to the other side, um, that it would make the world of difference.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Whew. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you, girl. I told you from the first time I met you, I was like, oh, I like her.
Yes. Well,
Hmm.
say goodbye to everyone, but
Bye.
you stay on.
Yeah.